Let's go. Sweet. Guys, welcome to another episode of Cheflet Cooks, the Superior Taste series. We've got one more soup next month, which is going to be a lot of fun. A really big closeout, one of my favorite recipes, something I came up with back when I was working in kitchens, and it's still being served today. It's that good, so I'm really excited about that. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's really good. It's even more of a classic New England staple than kale soup, so that might give you a good sort of indication of what that might be. That being said, today we are going to do a kale soup. We're going to do a vegan kale soup today. Linguiça, for me, it just means a lot of really lovely family gathering things. It's really a comfort food for me. So not putting it in the soup is a big move, but I want to make it as accessible as possible. I want you to know that if you have friends that can't eat meat, or especially nowadays with alpha-gal, are literally unable to eat meat, you can still make something that's comforting and healthy and happy for them to eat. And so what we're going to do today to sort of make this soup taste like it has linguiça is we're going to take all the ingredients of linguiça, which is really just pork, garlic, and paprika, and we're going to put them in the soup. So we don't have pork, obviously, we're taking that part out. But we're going to put a lot of garlic. I'm going to put both of these bulbs of garlic into this soup. And I have smoked paprika, which is the huge, probably the most important thing for this entire recipe. Linguiça, for me at least, usually I'll grill it or I'll saute it first to get some nice char bits on the edge. And so what we're going to do with the smoked paprika is we're going to cook it in with the oil and thyme at the beginning to almost toast the spice. That's going to release a lot of the flavor. It's almost going to like char it a little bit, just like you would get from those little charred bits of the linguiça once you put it into the soup. So that's going to be a really, really important flavor base to the soup. It's going to really just sort of get us to a point where we won't even notice that linguiça is not in here. I cooked this soup a couple years ago for West Tisbury Library. During school breaks, they do a soup program there to help feed the kids who may not have school lunches anymore. The whole community is invited, though. If you guys haven't ever been, I highly suggest going during next February break. It's so much fun, big community gathering, and there's delicious soups that are usually made by local chefs. So I made this kale soup for them once. It's always vegan because, again, accessibility is really important when you're serving an entire community, and it was a hit. Alexandra was upset with me, though. That's my partner, because she was like, "You're supposed to make a vegan soup," and I was like, "It is vegan." Yeah. So she even couldn't tell that there wasn't meat in here. The plan really that do I not have oil? The way we're going to sort of, it's right here. That we're going to emulate the meat is we're going to add a very good amount of oil in here. We're not going to skimp it all, probably way more than we need. And then again, like I said, we're going to toast that spice and really sort of bring it together. And we're also just going to put an insane amount of garlic in here. So without further ado, I'm going to start. I'm going to get this thing heated up, and I'm going to start breaking up my garlic. So garlic is probably one of my absolute favorite things. For those of you who do cook at home often, it's kind of one of those beautiful things where when you start cooking and you put garlic in the pan, everyone in the house comes by and goes, "Man, it smells so good. What are you cooking?" And it's like, well, at the moment it's just garlic, but it's a good nose. It's called an allium, garlic and onions, but they're also aromatics. That's herbs and garlic and things like fennel are called your aromatics because when you're cooking, they're the things that smell really good and sort of draw people to you and ask you, "What are you cooking? Why does that smell so good?" And so garlic is amazing, and it just so happens that not only does it smell good, but it tastes absolutely amazing. We are going to brown the garlic, which is going to add a lot more flavor, but we don't want to burn it. Garlic gets very, very bitter when you burn it. Sometimes that can be really nice. Bitter is a flavor that we often, as humans, tend to avoid because a lot of times it means bad things. Poisons are often bitter. Things that are not good for us are often bitter. But also some of the things that are the best for us are also bitter. Medicine with lots and lots of not vitamins. Well, vitamins, yeah, let's call them vitamins for now. Of nutrients, oftentimes will be very bitter. Dark, bitter greens will be extremely bitter. There's even some foods like bitter melon that is insanely bitter, but also very, very good for us. So it's hard sometimes to sort of overcome our brains telling us this is bad, and get to the point of sort of enjoying that bitterness. But garlic gets very, very bitter. It's not really an enjoyable experience. It can be an experience, and sometimes chefs will use that as a contrast to something else. If you have something very, very salty, bitter can have a home there. The salt actually blocks the bitter taste buds. So if you ever have something that's incredibly bitter, maybe you burnt the bottom of your soup and you're getting that sort of bitter burnt flavor, adding more salt can actually help. Obviously, you know, if you don't want to have tons of salt, you don't want to just have a salt soup, but it is sort of a very effective way of fixing something that maybe you made very bitter, or if you're trying to eat something that's very bitter, you know, it can be a very good method to combat that and be able to, you know, sort of choke it down. I actually really love bitter foods. About 3 years ago now, for those of you who watched my my online series, when we did Chef LeCook's from my house, you all know that my stove doesn't cook on anything but low and high, or rather an off and high, and so I oftentimes burn food, you know, sometimes on purpose, especially nowadays, but a lot of times it was on accident. And I got to the point where I just kind of developed a taste for it. I actually enjoy it now. Like I'll make popcorn and leave it on the stove for like a couple of seconds to get a burnt bottom. Something about it just like, I don't know if my body is like telling me, hey, you need more char in your nutrient, whatever it is. I do actually kind of enjoy that flavor now. It's worth experimenting with. We're not going to mess with bitter today though. The most bitter thing we're going to be putting in the soup is going to be kale. And honestly, on a good day, kale is actually more sweet than bitter. This unfortunately is not any local kale. I couldn't get any winter kale. They had already all been sold. Winter and spring kale is probably the best kale in the entire world. It's sweeter. The nutrient count is a lot higher because that plant is imperiled. So anytime a plant is in danger of dying, it supercharges itself. You know, it either eats everything it can or it stores everything it can. So, you know, if you're eating the root of a vegetable that is going to, you know, that's close to perishing from cold, it's likely to be as sweet as it ever would have been. If you're eating a hot pepper, for instance, that's been, you know, dehydrated and hasn't gotten enough water, that's going to probably be the spiciest pepper you've ever had in your life. In general, plants that aren't very healthy tend to produce some of the most nutrient-dense food because they're doing their best to either propagate and make that fruit as important, you know, putting all their effort into keeping that fruit alive, or they're putting that effort into their own body so that if their plant matter dies, their roots will still survive. So, you know, we don't usually do that on purpose to our crops because, you know, healthy crops will survive and sometimes produce for multiple years. But a lot of times you'll see trees that are like on the way out, they'll produce more fruit than they've ever produced before, and that's that same process of, you know, disaster actually creating something more produce than before. So I don't know why I started talking about that. We were talking about bitter, I guess, but we're not going to put bitter in here. Winter kale, that's right, winter kale and spring kale. So winter kale is very nice because that cold has started to hit and it started to concentrate all of its nutrients into the parts of it that are still alive, which for kale, luckily because it's a pretty cold hardy crop, is actually the greens. And then spring kale is equally as delicious because all of that nutrients that's been concentrated in these sort of dark winter survival leaves. The survival leaves from winter will be very nutrient dense and delicious, but they're usually a lot more tough because they have to survive the winter. In the spring, when they don't have to do that anymore, they have these beautiful new tender growths, and those tender growths take all of that that nutrients that was stored through the winter, and they're eating it. They're using it to create more. So they're also nutrient dense, but they're tender and sweet. So they're very different flavor profile. It's kind of hard to like save kale over the winter, but if you ever get a chance to like try some winter kale, if you have any plants at home, for instance, go out and pick some right now and just try it. And then in the spring, when you get that new spring growth, pick some of that, or go to our local farm and grab some, and just try them next to each other. It's like you're eating an entirely different plant. There's a lot of different leafy greens in the world, but it's really, really fun. Like a spring kale, very, very fun and easy to make a salad out of. Not that I wouldn't do that with winter kale, but I'd probably put some oil and salt on it and like really massage it and beat it up to get it tender. With a spring kale, you don't really need to do that. You can just kind of chop it up, toss it with your dressing, and be done. It's very, very tender, very delicious. This is getting nice and hot, which is good. There's my oil. So again, we're going to put way more oil than I probably need in here. Let's just go for all of it. Because we want that fat. We want the fat that we would be getting from the meat, and the only way to get that is going to be, in this case, from a vegetable source. And so this is actually probably hot enough. I'm just going to turn that off for now. We're just going to chop up this garlic, and I'm going to do pretty big chunks. Again, we want texture in the soup. Not again, but for the first time, we want texture in the soup because we are eliminating that linguiça, which would often be like a very nice sort of chewy textural part of this experience. And so I'm going to cut the onions fairly large as well. I'm going to leave the garlic in pretty big chunks. That way when you do get a chunk of that garlic, you know, it'll be sweet. It'll have that paprika flavor to it because we're going to be cooking it with the paprika in a second here. And because it has that paprika flavor to it, your brain might go, ooh, linguiça, you know, and that's kind of what we're trying to go for here. We're really trying to trick ourselves into thinking that this is something that it's not. Nowadays, with a lot of sort of vegan and vegetarian foods, they oftentimes will try and trick the brain by, you know, making it look like something else. And that's a great idea, but making it taste like something else, that's the real sort of solution. And so that's what we're going to try and do today. That's what we're going to attempt and succeed at, I guarantee. As long as I don't burn the garlic, which should be fine. So I'm going to put this garlic in two different places. I'm going to put some of it in the pan. I'm going to save some of it for later to use with our kale. When we do cook the kale down, we want that kale to also taste garlicky just because it's better that way. And so I'm going to save some of this to cook with the kale later. And the rest is going to be the base for our soup. And it's going to get a nice brown on it. I don't want too big a chunks, but I do want something fairly nice. Not do a great job of cleaning this. That's okay. You guys don't mind, right? All right, let's turn this back on. Let's get it cranking. Get ready to go. So I'm going to cut my onions right now, right before I put my garlic in. I'm just going to get them started. They're going to go into this pot pretty soon after my thyme as well. They're my emergency. So anytime I'm cooking garlic on the stove, I usually want to have my next ingredient at hand, which for me usually ends up being onions. Because when I add them to the pan, immediately that temperature is going to drop. And you know, if my garlic is just starts to burn at the edges, if I take it off the pan like this, the oil's still going to be hot, right? So that garlic's probably going to burn. But if I put something in the pan, that oil's going to immediately drop in temperature, and it's going to save my garlic. So anytime I'm cooking garlic like this, and I'm trying to, dang. So I got these giant onions because the recipe said 2 large onions, right? And I'm like, that's a large onion. But apparently this one at least has a bit of a soft outside, so that's unfortunate, but that's okay. This one's got plenty. I am going to be doing this recipe 1.5 times, I'd say. These are fairly large bunches of kale, and I just wanted to make sure everybody had enough. So I'm just upping the recipe just a little bit to make sure we don't run out of food. But if you see me sort of like, dang, this onion's kind of sad. Oh well, so it goes. It's still going to taste like onion. It's already most of the way cooked. So yeah, I'm just upping the recipe to make sure. So if you see that any inconsistencies in my measuring, that's probably why. That oil is starting to smell really good, so I'm going to get my garlic in there. My onions are now at a point where I can cut one of these up and you know, get it in there in a relatively quick amount of time, just in case I need to. All right, so let's go. Oh yeah. That's actually hotter oil than I thought. So let's turn that down a little bit. We're just going to shake it around. Now everybody's going to come in here and ask us what we're cooking, so be prepared for that. So lovely. That's just going to get a little color, and it's not going to take very long. So I personally, when I'm cooking soups, and you'll see this next month as well, I'm going to use some thyme then, I like to just put the whole thing in there, just like that. And you can hear it starts to toast, which is really, really nice. All that all that flavor is getting infused. And I really like it this way. You can pick it clean if you want to, but I just find this is a lot easier. And then later when we're eating the soup, you know, you can pick those stems out, or when we're serving the soup, we pick the stems out, totally fine. But the stems themselves also have flavors and oils in them, so it's definitely not out of the question to put them in there. We just have to be very careful here with this. Don't want it to burn. I'm just going to put that there, let the hot oil do its work. Get my paprika ready. So we're going to toast the paprika in the oil. Usually this thing's not that hot. I'm kind of excited about it right now. So again, I'm going to cut some nice big pieces. What I'm doing here is I'm just cutting along the sort of ridges of the onion. And then I'm going to turn that, and I'm just going to cut this way. And that's going to make very, very good cubes, which is what we're looking for here. We want something, you know, spoon-sized, basically. And I'll show you that again. I just wanted to, again, have some onion available to drop this temperature before I put the paprika in. I don't want to burn the paprika either. That'd be pretty bad. Would not taste very good. So recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of paprika, I believe. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to do 3, again, because I am upping this recipe. My garlic's got a little bit of brown at the edges. I hope you guys can see that. So that's what I'm looking for right there. I don't want it burned, but I do want a little bit extra flavor in there because it is going to cook more. So again, we are putting a lot of paprika in here, and that is because this is our linguiça. You know, I would put a whole, maybe 2 packages of linguiça in here. That linguiça has per package about a tablespoon, if not more, smoked paprika. And then I might even put some more in the recipe anyways. So we're not actually really overdoing it here. It's just that we're not putting any meat in with it. So we're gonna just cook that in our oil. It's gonna change the color of our oil completely. Paprika is a lovely flavor, but it's also a really, really nice color. And so what's happening now is we're opening up that paprika. We're getting that flavor all bloomed. We're also infusing the garlic with that flavor. So like I said earlier, when you do eventually get a chunk of garlic in your mouth, it's gonna taste like, oh, it smells so good. Okay, so I'm just looking at the color here, and that's already starting to get a little bit darker, so that's perfect. I'm just gonna take that off and put my onions in here. I really don't want to go too far with that because burnt usually means bitter, and burnt paprika is very, very bitter. And that's just gonna be a beautiful color. These are, I guess they'd be called Spanish onions, which is a yellow onion, I believe. But you can use any onion you want. There's no like, you could use red onion, you could use literally anything you had on hand. You could use leeks, you could use green onion, like you could literally use anything you wanted to here. It's really, onions for me, a lot of times when I'm cooking are just a filler. They're a very nice sort of solid piece of fiber that is gonna cook down, is gonna add some nice flavor, but at the end of the day, it's just gonna be a really nice thing to eat. I love getting onions in my meal in any shape and form. So for me, onions and potatoes also tend to be more of just sort of a filler vegetable. So yeah, we're gonna get those guys in there. Awesome. So yeah, that's looking really good. I'm very excited about that. We'll taste it later too, and we might decide to put some more smoked paprika in there, depending on how it tastes. If it's not quite smoky enough, I'll put more in there, but the 3 tablespoons is a good place to start. So we're just gonna get this all coated up. And this is also the time to put the oregano in there. I don't have any normal oregano. I'm just gonna use some Italian seasoning, which has, you know, oregano in it. It's got some basil as well. I think that flavor is gonna be just fine. And it is a tablespoon. So again, I'm just gonna stick with a tablespoon. I don't want the basil to get too aggressive here. So I'm just gonna do a tablespoon of the Italian seasoning. And I think the paprika is gonna sort of carry the flavor for us, so we won't need too much more. That's really just to give some sort of dynamic flavor in there. There's gonna be, again, a lot of different herbs and spices depending on what type of linguiça you get. But oregano is usually one of them, so I just wanna have something else in there to sort of go against our paprika and our thyme here, so that when you taste that, you know, your taste buds are sort of awoken. Whew. I'm like crying, those onions are so spicy. It's just that time of year for spicy onions, you know. If you don't cure your onions properly, that's why you get them crying like that. And so, especially if you're dealing with local onions or an unsure curing process, and I don't know what was going on with those onions, but they definitely had something weird going on. That's where you end up with that sort of those chemicals, the crying chemicals. When onions are cured properly, you don't get that at all. You cut them open, they're beautiful, they just smell sweet and delicious, but it's usually indicative of how they were stored when you have that sort of crying. It's gonna be good, guys. It's gonna be really good. Okay, cool, so I got my garlic for later. Let's get our potatoes started. So these are local potatoes, which I was very happy about. If I was doing this, you know, and I wasn't trying to find these, a good big long potato, like classic potato shape, is going to be a lot easier just because it's less cuts, basically. But I'm not super upset about this. So I'm going to do my classic method. Those of you guys who've cooked with me before have seen this a million times. It's planks and then sticks and then cubes. Always, if you can, you want to cut on a flat surface. So that's why I'm taking these little niblet bits and putting them to the side. And then I'm always thinking about how big I want my chunks to be. So I'm cutting them into planks that are the size of the cube, right? So I'm eventually going to turn this into cubes, and I want them to be about, I think it's like a ½ inch wide. Because again, we're going big for this dish. We want mouthfeel. We want things that are going to, you know, look good on your spoon, and are going to help our bodies sort of forget the fact that we don't have meat. Hearty cuts are going to sort of trick us into thinking that we are eating a hearty meal, which we are. It just so happens that it's a vegetarian hearty meal. So again, local foods, you always have a little bit more sort of fun. That's just a little piece that this potato grew around. So we'll just cut that out when we get to the other side of it. All right. And I do want to keep this at a fairly high temperature, just because I want these onions to cook down and really get all that beautiful paprika flavor in them. Oh man, this is going to be good. So what I'm doing here too is I'm sort of batch cutting these. For me at least, my brain tends to work better when I do the same action over and over again. Repetitive action tends to be easier on a lot of people for efficiency. So I'm cutting all of my planks first, and then I'm going to switch to sticks. I'll probably do sticks and cubes all at once, just because that feels like kind of I'm going to run out of space on this cutting board. But I do tend to do this whenever I'm cooking. I always do batches instead of doing the whole process completely through, especially when I'm doing more than like 5 things. If I was doing like 2 onions, for instance, although I did kind of batch the onions, I might cut them completely through before I move to the next onion. But for anytime I get more than like 5 or more, my brain immediately goes to sort of batch orientation. Oh, these onions are going to be so good. Like, that's a meal by itself. You don't have to do anything to that. You put some water in there, smoked paprika and onion soup, like. But we're gonna do other things to it. So, actually forgot. I'm gonna put a little bit of salt in here. For those of you who've cooked with me in the past, I don't always put a lot of salt in my foods, but I just found out the most amazing hack in the world. For those of you who are low salt eaters, potassium is actually an amazing chemical. You can get potassium salt for one thing, which is really nice. It kind of tastes like salt. It's a little bit more bitter. We were talking about bitter earlier, and I do like bitter flavors. But what's more important is you can mix it with your normal salt, which I'm not doing today, but if you wanted to, you could mix it with your normal salt, and the potassium actually binds to the sodium and takes it out of your system. So if you are needing to eat a low sodium diet, adding potassium to your diet actually lets you eat more salt, more sodium at least. So kind of a fun little hack that I've been doing, and it's allowed me to bring salt back into my life, which is, I kind of forgot how good it was. So again, now we're jumping onto the stick phase of this, and I'm just going to start putting these potatoes in and layering them on top. As I go here. They don't have to be perfect. In fact, they probably shouldn't be perfect. If they are, you're going to make people feel, inadequate or something. So when you get like really, really nice food, sometimes it just feels like I could never do this myself. So it's really nice to be able to sort of look at your food and go, I could do that. And so that's usually my goal whenever I cook. Plus, it's kind of a weird thing, but I played this video game when I was younger where you could cook in the video game. And one of the characters was always made fun of because their cuts were horrendous, like massive and misshaped and the wrong size. But their food was also always awarded like the best and highest praise. Like, it was the best food you could possibly get your hands on. So I kind of took that to heart. I was like, all right, cook ugly, flavors first, and it's been kind of how I do things, and it's never steered me wrong yet, at least. I forget which one was the one that had the bad hit. Well, we'll figure it out later. This one's good. If at any point, guys, if you ever have questions, just yell them out. I'm very good at multitasking. I do kind of enjoy it. I think it almost turns my brain on more, so I'm like ready to go. Smoke, what's the difference flavor-wise? It's the smoke, honestly. So smoked paprika has just been smoked. The paprika, for those who don't know, is just the Spanish word for pepper. So, like, when you go and order, if you like trying to find paprika in the grocery store, you might end up with just a whole pepper. Don't quote me on that. I actually don't know Spanish. It might be something else, but I'm pretty sure it's paprika. Yeah, thanks. And then, so the smoked paprika is literally those peppers have just been smoked before they're dried and turned into a powder. That smoked flavor is going to give you a very similar flavor to, in this situation, we're going after that smoked flavor because we're trying to emulate linguiça, which uses paprika in it, and then is oftentimes, for me at least, grilled or cooked over an open fire before it's served. And so that smoky flavor for linguiça tends to come in the cooking process. Some linguiças do use smoked paprika in them, but not all of them. And so the smoked paprika is basically for us trying to take that flavor of like an open fire that you'd normally cook that linguiça over, and we're trying to bring that into our soup because we're not using linguiça today. But it's smoke. It's really smoky flavor. If you haven't ever tried liquid smoke or had like really good barbecue, for instance, it's hard to kind of describe. It tends to be like a little bit sweet. It's very deep. Like for flavors, I always feel like it's kind of like a palette of like where on my face I feel it. Like sour tends to be like higher, and things deep like seaweed, for instance, tends to be lower. Feels like a chest thing. I don't know why that is, but I would say smoked paprika is very much like low flavor. It's very earthy and sort of grounded. It's very different. Whereas sweet paprika tends to be, for me, more of just a coloration. I almost feel like I barely taste it. It doesn't really have much of a flavor. It's almost more of a garnish than anything else. But that's definitely a lot more higher on my palate. It feels brighter and more of a contrast. That's why we often put it on a very heavy dish like deviled eggs, because it kind of brightens up that flavor and brings the whole dish sort of a little bit higher up on your palate. So I don't know if anybody else feels that way about flavors, sort of where they hit you, but that's always kind of been my experience, is like a height involved. I'm just not going to bother with that potato. We don't know what it's been through. So now, oops, making a mess today. So now I'll go back through, because I hate wasting anything, and I'll actually cut these tops. If you wanted to, these are great for breakfast too. Just put them right in a pan, get this side nice and crispy, and then flip them over, put a little water in there and steam them up. They're absolutely delicious. You can even, like, if you get a big enough potato, you could even make a sandwich right out of the potatoes, which could be fun. Absolutely love potatoes for breakfast. Potatoes anytime, really. But you can do anything with these. I'm, again, just going to put them right in the soup. And you'll also notice, I didn't mention it earlier, but I'm not peeling my potatoes. You know how we mentioned potassium earlier? There's a lot of potassium in potato skins. Also just a lot of vitamins in general, but tons and tons of potassium. More than a banana, in fact, in a single potato. But it's all in the skin. So if you cut the skin off, you're really missing out on that. There's a couple things that I'll peel potatoes for. Gnocchi, for instance. Anything that's very delicate, or that skin might sort of break that sort of might break the shell. Like if I'm doing like a potato stuffed dumpling or something like that, I'll take the skins out. Anytime the skins might be sort of detrimental to my end goal, I want to make sure that they're not involved in the process. But anytime I can get away with it, I don't cut the skins off. Mashed potatoes, it's skin on. It's just my way. I really enjoy it. I love the skin. I love the skin of everything. I like beets, skin on beets, turnips. There's not really many things I don't like eating the skin on, except for like kiwis maybe. Although apparently a lot of people do like eating kiwi skin. It's not me, but some people don't get that like horrible itchy throat from eating kiwi skin, and so they actually do it. Same for mango skin as well. Again, not something I enjoy, but there are people out there that do, and that's kind of the fun part about food. Is it's a personal experience. You get to make your own choices about what you put in your body. And if you start to cook for yourself, those choices really start to expand, and it makes life, at least for me, a lot better. I just made shepherd's pie and lasagna last night, and I made four. I made shepherd's pie and lasagna that was normal. I did like sausage and ricotta cheese for lasagna, and for the shepherd's pie it was just like classic veggies. But I have a friend who has alpha-gal, and so I made a batch of each for them as well. So I did a nut cheese, which, for those of you guys who came to the lookalike series, it's that same almond nut cheese. I did a nut cheese for the alpha-gal lasagna with roasted squash, which was really tasty. And then for the shepherd's pie was a little easier because they can actually eat turkey, so we just did ground turkey. But we didn't put butter. They have a coconut oil butter that's actually really tasty that we put in the mashed potatoes. It was chef's kiss. But I just cooked last night 4 different casseroles, and I love casseroles. They're so delicious. Honestly, if we had more time here and I could actually bake, I think there'd be a casserole series here, but it just doesn't sort of like work with this format. It's probably one of my absolute favorite things. When I was younger, I had this sort of thought process of opening a restaurant with my sister called Chris and Casseroles. Her name's Cassidy. It didn't happen, but there's still time. So, all right. So this is going. I'm gonna. So I don't have to pay attention to this. I'm gonna put some liquid in here. That's gonna allow it to just sort of simmer and cook. The potatoes have a really nice coating of oil on them, everything in here is just like greasy, which is what I want. It's really, again, over oiled. When we put the kale in there later, the kale is going to sort of absorb some of that and really sort of make everything taste good. Tomatoes are going for that. So usually I'd use water, but I had some leftover veggie stock from last month, so I'm just going to put that in there. It's just going to add a bit more flavor, and that's never a bad thing. But water would be perfectly fine here, like absolutely no problem whatsoever. We have beautiful, beautiful tomatoes going in there that are going to have some juice in them, and then that paprika as well is really going to sort of bring that flavor together. So we don't need a stock, but I just happen to have this, so I'm using it. It also has some salt in it already, so that's helping with the seasoning process. I don't have to add any extra salt to this necessarily. So yeah, all of that beautiful paprika did sort of wash off of the potatoes, but that garlic and onions, you can see, are still kind of red, and that's what we want. We want them to carry that flavor. The potatoes will absorb it from the liquid, but the garlic and onions are what we really want to taste like that smoked paprika and that what's it called? Linguiça. Alright, let's see. So I'm just going to add a little bit more water in here. We are going to put kale in here, probably about like that much kale. So I'm only going to add maybe like that much again of water. I don't want too much in here. I just want enough to sort of cover the potatoes so they can start to cook. We'll add more later if we think we need it. But the tomatoes also have liquid in them, so we want this to be chunky. It's hearty. It's a winter soup, you know. All right, cool. Let that hang out, and then let's jump into our kale. So, for those of you, beans go in later. When did I say to put the beans in? With the kale, I think, right? Yeah. Cool. All right, so kale's really beautiful. I love it. This is curly kale. There's a lot of other different types of kale. Lacentano or dino kale has flat leaves. You can treat it a lot more like collard greens if you ever had those. But curly kale is my first experience with kale, probably your first experience with kale. When I think about kale, this is what I think about. There's a lot of different ways to peel the greens off. Some people will use their fingers and just sort of pick it off. But I've got one method I really love, and it involves my pinky finger. You put the stem in between your pinky finger and your ring finger like that. And you want to have a sort of loose grip, and then you just pull up the stem like that. All right? So if you've never done that before, I highly suggest trying it next time you get some kale. These ones are a little weird. The greens go like all the way down the stem, but it's pinky finger and ring finger. You just sort of make a little, you put them over themselves, but it's a loose grip. You don't want to grip too tight, and then you just pull up, and it comes right off the entire thing. So you're just going to watch me do that a couple more times. Sometimes it doesn't work out so good. Like I said, this kale's kind of weird. A lot of times you'll have like a pretty decent stem on the kale, and there won't be any greens on there, but there's a lot of greens on the base of this. It's very tough. You know, this is a winter kale, it seems like. A spring kale would be a lot more flexible and wouldn't break as far down the stem. But hey, you know, you can't always win. So we're going to try a different method. I'm going to go up a finger, so I have a little bit bigger space. And that's going to be more gentle on the kale, and hopefully we won't break as much, which, yeah, it looks like that's working out really well. So we're just going to strip all these kale. You can use the stems. If you're using a soup, if you're cooking a soup that like has like celery and onions and carrots in it for the base, for instance, cut these up and add them with your celery. There's nothing wrong with them. They taste good. They have tons of vitamins in them, and they look like celery, which is nice. For this soup, I think they're going to be visually kind of unappetizing. You're going to be looking through it and be like, what is that? You know, we didn't put celery in the soup, so I wouldn't try and hide the kale stems. But it's also not going to hurt. You know, if you're cooking this for yourself and you just don't want to waste the stems, or you don't have a compost, throw them in there. It's not going to hurt anything. I would have done this earlier, though. I would have stripped these in and put them in with the onions before we put the potatoes in. That's when I would have put the kale stems in, just because they're a little bit more tough. You want to really cook them down. This is definitely weird kale. Not what I'm used to, at least. That's okay. The method works pretty good. It doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. And again, a little stem isn't going to hurt anybody. So.
I like in the recipe when you put the extra garlic in the kale. And now it's still good.
Don't you worry. Yeah, you gotta have. So we talked about layering flavors, I think, last time, and it can be very effective for something like this, especially. I could just cook the kale and put it in the soup, and that would be fine. It's not going to hurt anything. That soup is going to flavor the kale once it gets in there. But if I can flavor the kale beforehand, it's going to make my life a lot easier. And this, also important to note, this technique here is not necessary. You can just put the kale in at this point and be done with it. Part of the reason I'm doing this is because I want the soup to be done faster, right? So if I put the kale in now, the potatoes are going to take longer to cook because the kale is going to take the heat away from the potatoes. If I cook the kale separately, my kale is going to be cooked by the time I put it in, and the potatoes will have had that whole cooking time to also cook. And so for a situation like this where, we have plenty of time, but I like to be able to get things sort of done as fast as possible for you guys. It's a really great space and time saving technique. It lets me, cook this kale down to a point where it's actually going to fit in here, because right now it's not happening. So that's kind of essential as well. And I'll do that occasionally depending on the dish, but a lot of times it's with greens. Greens especially, I like to sort of pre-cook like this. So we don't want that water. And now we're going to chop this up. So I'm going to hopefully do this all at once. So kale is like spinach, has a lot of water in it, but it doesn't have as much water as spinach. It's fairly fibrous. So this is a little bit harder to do. We're essentially just going to gather it all in a ball. We're going to move this away from the edge so I don't lose any. Come on. If you had bigger leaves, you could like stack them, which is quite useful as well, but we have a couple small ones in here, so I'm just kind of going for the crazy method here. So I'm getting in a ball, and this is something you can do with herbs as well. You want to ball them up, and when you ball them up, you're doing two things. You're getting a nice solid surface, which means that you're not going to bruise the herbs when you're cutting them, but you're also going to be able to cut through more of them at a time. Don't do this big a ball at home. It's probably not a good idea. Yeah, I have very big hands, and even this is like dangerous, right? Like my fingers right there, I could cut it. I'm not going to, but I just want to see what I can do, honestly. And so once you get this big ball, you just want to sort of shave off the edges. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hopefully cut this two ways. We're going to cut it one way this way, and then one way this way. And that's going to get these pieces of kale pretty small. There's going to be big chunks, so that's okay. Sometimes it's one of my favorite things when I'm eating kale soup and I get like that little you get too much kale. It really makes you feel like, it is kale soup after all. So that's kind of a fun one. Let's get this heating up while we're over here. So if you're lucky, which I am today, it doesn't sort of fall apart too much, and you still have a decent sized sort of pile. And then all you need to do is just turn your board and then kind of come through it on the other way. And that should get you pretty small pieces of kale. If you've got the time and the patience, you can also just do this while you're ripping it off. You can tear it up into little pieces, but I never do that. I like cooking fast. I do like cooking slow too on occasion. There are certain dishes that really, make it a lot more fun when you really take the time on them. But cutting up greens is not one of those things I like to take time on. Having a big cutting board is obviously very helpful here. And just be prepared. Keep your fingers out of it. You're not going to be able to see them most of the time while you're doing this. So just know where they are, and you should be just fine. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to cook these down. If I find any pieces that are like really, really big when I go to put them in the pan, I'll just pull them out and rip them up. Sweet. We'll leave that there for now. Oh, I used all my oil. Whoops. So I just want a little bit more oil for this garlic. That's going to go in the kale. I'll probably read my recipe at some point. Yeah, garlic and brown and kale. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, in the recipe I did say to cut up the stems, I just realized, which we didn't do today, but that's okay. We're going to be a-okay with that. Oil, that's right. So this is looking good over here. We've got a bit of a boil going, which is awesome. I don't want it to boil too hard, so if it does start to like really boil, I'll turn it down a little bit. But for now, I think this is going to be good. And just while we're here, I'm going to taste the broth and just see what we're looking at for flavors. I want to know, is that thyme coming through? I want to see how much smoked paprika is coming through and make sure that it's really like where we want it to be. So it's pretty good. More salt though, definitely. Linguiça is definitely very salty, so kale soup tends to also have that nice edge to it. So that would have been fine the way it is, but I do want, like, when you guys take a bite of this later, I want you to think to yourselves, there's linguiça in that. And so if I don't put this salt in there, you're never going to be convinced. So. We are seasoning the potatoes at this point as well, which is very important. So I tasted pretty good on the paprika side, though. The first thing I got was that beautiful smoky flavor, so I think we're doing good on that. that's starting to go. I think we're gonna do a little switcheroo here. This guy's almost boiled. No, I'm going back. Never mind. Take it back. I don't want the potatoes to be hard, so I really want to make sure this has all the heat. Obviously at home you guys are probably gonna have more burners, so you can kind of like spread this out, but we work with what we got, you know. And this burner is more of like a heating burner, so it just doesn't get as hot as fast. But we're good. Let's go ahead and get our garlic in there. All right. I'm gonna put a little pepper in here as well, just to sort of add a little bit more flavor. Pepper grinder is not very good. I swear I'm not putting that much pepper in there. And then sure, while that garlic's starting to cook, I'm just gonna get my cans open and get us ready for that next step. Perfect. So I got these really nice tomatoes this time because it's just where I was shopping. But fire roasted tomatoes is what you want to generally go for. If you have fresh tomatoes, that's totally fine. You can grill them if you want to. You don't have to. The smoked paprika is doing a lot of work for us here, but anytime you can add more of that fire flavor into the dish, it's going to be helpful to bring us to our sort of flavor goal at the end. And so that's why I chose fire roasted tomatoes. Again, use what you've got on hand. Anything is going to work here. I just really like these particularly, just because you can even see they have like that beautiful char mark on them, and that's going to add a lot of really nice flavor. I'm not familiar with this brand at all, but they look a lot like the ones I am used to. So I'm very excited because honestly, this like alone is just a really nice snack. Like, who needs salsa? You just eat fire roasted tomatoes. And we got some beans as well. Again, I'm using kidney beans today because that's what I grew up on, was red kidney beans in my kale soup. But you know, use any beans you want. I know white cannellini beans are pretty classically used as well. So it really just, this one already perfect. So you can see most of the thyme has fallen off of this, and it's really just a twig at this point. So now I can take it out. It's no longer necessary. So as I'm stirring and I see those, I'm just going to start pulling them out because they've kind of done their job. There's plenty of thyme in this soup now, which is great. Absolutely love thyme. If you can get it fresh like that especially, it's just a really, really nice addition to almost anything. For soups especially, I just love throwing it in just like that. Okay, kale's doing good.
Refried beans?
What about refried beans?
Refried beans in your kale soup?
No, sounds great.
Try it sometime.
Like, it'll thicken it a little bit too. I love that. Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. I did very recently learn a technique with making beans for tacos, where you just pour the whole can into a pot and then put some cumin and paprika and chili powder in there and just cook them in their own juices. They sort of thicken up. They almost turn into like a refried bean texture, and they're delicious. I've always drained my beans for tacos and then like cook them and season them, but like it's the best. It's such a good method. You get a really nice product. The aqua fava, which is what I guess French? I don't know if that's French or not. What the bean juice is called is a really, really nice product. You can actually do a lot of fun things with it in like the sweet realm as well. If you take it and you whip it, it actually whips up like a meringue. So you can use like do a vegan meringue as well with it, which is kind of fun. All right, so this garlic's starting to brown, which is great. I'm gonna go ahead and put my first layer of kale in there, and I'm not gonna touch it. I'm just gonna put the kale in, just like that, and just shove it as full as I possibly can, which might be all of this actually. That's great, perfect. So I usually, when I'm cooking this at home, I use a big, wide 12-inch cast iron, but if you do have the Dutch oven, it makes your life a lot easier because you can just fit more kale in there. I'm just going to push it down, and that bottom layer is going to get the heat and start to wilt, pick up all that lovely garlic flavor, and then what we'll do is we'll start tossing it like we would a whipped cream, or folding it rather, like we would a whipped cream or a meringue, and that's going to help sort of distribute that uncooked kale to the bottom. Beautiful. Awesome. So beans are ready for the soup. Tomatoes are ready for the kale. Now we're just cooking. No more prep. I do like prepping while I cook because I feel like it kind of makes the whole process go faster. But then once you get to this point when everything's prepped, you're like, what am I going to do? So this is boiling, nice good boil, so I'm going to turn that down. And I want that more at a simmer. I just don't want the potatoes to get mushy. I do want them to have like a little bit of texture to them. So we'll see how that goes. Let's start with 7 actually. And then let's sort of fold this kale in. So I'll just take my whole hand. I really did pack this. I probably should have done this in batches, but oh well. And I just will almost kind of try and flip it like that when it's this full. I'm already regretting my decision to do the whole thing at once. Work in batches when you do this next time. Don't make the mistakes I made. Like I said, kale is a lot like spinach in that there's a lot of moisture in it, but it's a lot less than spinach. It doesn't really wilt quite as much. This will probably get down maybe half to half what it is right now, but it won't go like super crazy like spinach and just like turn into nothing. I think 6 is actually good on that. So that's why working in batches is kind of more important here. If this was spinach, I wouldn't be concerned at all. Like this would wilt immediately, but the kale's just going to take a little bit of time, and you can tell that it's starting to cook at the bottom because you'll see there's like these darker bits, and that's just the heat activating the chlorophyll and getting it to change color. If you're ever cooking with green vegetables, a lot of times you'll see a step to blanch them, and that's exactly what that's for. You want to activate the chlorophyll, get that beautiful green color out. And you do that by putting them very shortly into a pot of boiling water and then ice bathing them. So you want to stop that cooking process. You don't want to cook them, you just want to activate the chlorophyll. You cool them, and then later you cook them in your dish, and they actually get fully cooked. But because you set that chlorophyll, they don't brown at all. They stay bright and green. Whereas if you put them in your dish raw, that chlorophyll is going to activate, and then immediately it's going to cook and turn brown. But if you activate it, then set it with cold water, it sticks around a lot better, and so you have a much greener, brighter dish. So if you ever see that in a step, that's why they're asking you to do that. It's not just like a crazy thing that chefs are asking you to do. Here's water right there. So just know that's what blanching's for. There's other reasons too. Sometimes blanching can be used to actually cook a product, but a lot of times, especially for green vegetables, when you see blanching it's more for the color, it's for presentation than anything else. For chefs on the line, we blanch a lot of our foods so that they cook faster. There is a little bit of cooking that happens in that process, and so if I'm putting something on my in my fridge that I'm going to be using, and want it to really just be able to heat it up, I'll often do like a blanch so that it's a lot faster when the time comes to actually cook it, and I'm not sitting there waiting for my green beans to cook through. In this dish, I can just kind of toss them in, and they're almost ready to go. And for a situation like that, you probably want to blanch them a little longer than just like 15 seconds. But again, it's all sort of a matter of what you need them for. Your use case is going to determine, what you're going to do. This is starting to look good. Not done yet by any means, but it's definitely starting to look good. Getting to the point where I'm feeling more comfortable putting some tomatoes in there. I just want the whole thing to be that dark green, and then I'm going to put tomatoes in there and let that sort of stew down. So I'm basically sort of making stewed kale, which is also a really fabulous meal. If you've never had it just with rice, it's just it's kale, or a little salt we're going to want to put in there. It's kale and salt, and garlic and tomatoes. Stewed is what we would call it if it's just with tomatoes. This is just like what I learned when I was down in New Orleans for a while cooking. Stewed means with tomatoes. Smothered means with tomatoes and pork. So as soon as you put meat in there, you start smothering them instead of stewing them. This is just like what my neighbors told me one day. So I don't know how official that is, but as far as I know, when you smother something, it's usually greens, and it's smothered with pork, and it's stewed with tomatoes. So that's just my little sort of bit of cultural knowledge that I grabbed when I was down in New Orleans, trying to start a restaurant actually a while back. So that was kind of fun. It didn't work out, but I did learn the difference. And in that moment, it was actually kind of funny because we talked about bitter melon earlier. I was actually stewing bitter melon. So there's a very large Vietnamese community down in New Orleans. A lot of them moved there quite a long time ago. because the sort of bayou area and the fishing is very similar to the way it was in Vietnam. And so there's a massive community in East New Orleans, big fisherman community. They have a really big market where they sell produce that they've imported to New Orleans and grow in their own backyards. I mean, one of the things they grow is bitter melon. If you've never seen bitter melon, I highly suggest looking it up. It's crazy. It looks like a cucumber, but it's got these like ridges down the side. And the center is like hollow. You can peel it out just like a melon would be. And it's super bitter. It's like insanely bitter, but it's incredibly good for you. Like most bitter things, medicine tends to be one of those bitter things, and this is a very medicinal plant. But in a sort of beautiful clash of culture, one of the really common ways to prepare it down in New Orleans is to smother it. You cook it down with garlic and onions and tomatoes and pork, and when that's done, once you're finished, you can hardly tell that it's bitter melon anymore. It just tastes like pork and onions and garlic and tomatoes. So any way you can get the medicine to go down is going to be helpful in that situation. But some people actually really love it. I actually haven't eaten it in like 5 years at this point, so maybe I love it now that I'm kind of a bitter head. I at the time I wasn't really as into bitter foods as I am now, so my palate might have changed since then as well. But yeah, bitter melon, really, really fun. The Vietnamese community in New Orleans is very healthy. Absolutely really cool that there's this sort of like microcosm of culture in a place that's already just packed full of culture from so many different parts of the world. It was a surprise to me to find out that there was a Vietnamese community as well, and just how healthy it was. So my kale's looking pretty good. You guys can hopefully see that it's all sort of turned that dark green. I don't need to cook this completely. I could probably cook this for another 20 minutes if I wanted to. Kale doesn't really once it gets cooked, it kind of just keeps its texture for a long time, which is why it's really nice in the soup. But we don't have that time. We don't need to cook it down like that because it's going to end up back in the soup and get some more time to cook. So again, these are big cans of tomatoes, but I am doing it 1.5 times. So I figured these are kind of like 3 normal cans. It might be a little more tomatoes than usual, but it'll be fine. At no point, anything in this recipe you want to change. If you don't like potatoes, don't put them in there. If you don't like onions, don't put it in there. If you don't like garlic, good luck. I don't know what to tell you about that one. It's really good. You should try it again one time. But yeah, just don't put it in there. Maybe the kale you should probably put in here, but you can just substitute it for a different kind of kale or collard greens if you like that better. You just don't tell your friends it's kale soup because they're gonna be like, that's not kale. But yeah, anything would go good in here. Tomatoes again, like you can see in the picture there. A lot of recipes don't put tomatoes in their kale soup. It's more of a white broth. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to be tasty. It's going to be delicious. It's just not what I like. And so, by extension, it's not what you guys are going to get today. But cooking in general, and I try and say this almost every time we do this, cooking is a personal experience. It's something you should do for yourself. When you see a recipe that you don't like, it doesn't matter why you don't like it. Change it. Change it and make it something that you do like. And if you can't do that, throw it away. You don't need that recipe. It's probably not for you. It doesn't matter if it was famous or if Oprah told you it was good or if you saw it somewhere that some fancy restaurant and it was important to. It's not worth it. If you don't like it, there's so much more food out there that is just going to make your life a lot better if you seek it out. So change recipes, change ingredients, substitute. Worst case scenario, it tastes bad and you have to give it to your dog or your chickens or something, but most of the time you're not going to go so far from the center that you're going to ruin it. It's always going to be good. You're going to be able to taste it. You're going to taste your mistakes, and then next time you won't make them. When I was a kid, I made a lot of mistakes in cooking, and my solution was to put ketchup on it. So you can always just put some ketchup on it, and at least it'll taste like ketchup instead of whatever you made. There's one particular time I can think about where I tried to make sloppy joes, and I seasoned them a lot. I don't know what I was thinking. I put way too much salt, way too much sauce. Literally everything was too much. I took a bite and it was just like overwhelming. So I put ketchup on it, and the ketchup was so under-seasoned compared to the dish that it actually fixed it and it tasted really good. And it just really solidified my love of ketchup. But I don't suggest fixing kale soup with ketchup. I don't think that's going to work so very good. But in general, at least my philosophy has always been eat your mistakes, learn from them, figure out how to do it better next time, and then smash it out of the park and impress all your friends. So That's worked pretty good for me over the years. I don't make mistakes like that anymore. I haven't had to ketchup sloppy joes in a while, although I do put ketchup in my sloppy joes on purpose now. This is really, it's a fabulous thing. Ketchup in general is a big part of a lot of different dishes. Chinese food, for instance, you would be surprised how much ketchup, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised how much ketchup plays a part in as a base for a lot of dishes. Just the fact that it's tomato paste and sugar together is very, very helpful for creating a thick dish. Some of like the mother sauces are, bechamel, which is like a white cream sauce that you thicken with flour. I'm going to forget the names of all of them, but one of them is a tomato sauce that is thickened with tomato paste, right? And so ketchup is like the perfect sort of thickening ingredient. It's got salt, it's got seasoning, it's got all these different herbs, or not herbs, but spices in there. And then it's got that tomato paste, which is really what you're using it for, a thickening agent. It gives you your soup, or in the case of Chinese food, general style, usually that like sort of thick flavor. They also use cornstarch, which is huge. But yeah, General Tso chicken is, again, don't quote me on this. I only know one recipe for it, but it has a decent amount of ketchup in it. It's ketchup and it's soy sauce and those little Chinese chili peppers. And then you cook that up and add some cornstarch to it and put your fried chicken in there. Like that's why it tastes so good. I mean, I love ketchup. I hope a lot of you guys love ketchup. It's okay if you don't. No judgment here whatsoever. I'm just testing my potatoes just to see where we're at here. Almost perfect. Great. I'm going to go ahead and marry these together. And then we're about 5 minutes out from soup. So, wow. So these are going in, and then if I'm lucky, I'm going to fit the beans too. I'm pretty sure they're going to fit in there. So again, we're going all that aquafaba as well. That's going to help to give us that mouthfeel in the soup that we were talking about earlier with the ketchup. But it's also just a lot of good nutrients and fiber. One of the reasons kale is so good is all that fiber, and so we don't want to waste that fiber just because it's in the beans. I might have to stop it too. This is crazy. When I write these recipes, I actually think about. I know I 1.5 this one, and that's why we're at this stage. But when I write these, I literally think about the ingredients and how many cups I have, so I know that I can fit it in this pot. And I thought I was safe to 1.5, and I think I was. I did put a good amount more potatoes than I probably should have, but oh my god, this looks perfect.
Christopher, the black beans should be drained because it's all sodium.
Yes, yeah. So exactly. If you're looking for diet, there is the salt that they cook them in is mostly in the liquid. So again, in this situation, I'm using it as an advantage because I didn't really put a decent amount of salt here, but for I think it's 16 quarts, 4 quarts. 1, 2, 4 quarts, 16 cups. For a batch like this, I didn't put really probably enough salt, depending on who you're talking to. Everybody has sort of different palates, so I'm actually happy that the salt's in there. But yeah, you're right. If you have any dietary restrictions whatsoever, definitely rinse your beans because that is where most of the stuff is, and especially if you have problems with too much fiber, you know what they say about beans. The juice is where that's coming from. If you rinse them off, you won't have as much problems with your gut from the beans either. I think I can fit this last one in here. Let's go. No worries, guys. We got water tension to protect us. It's fine. This is going to be so good. So this is very thick for kale soup, which is good. I'm sure you've had lots of different types of kale soup. This is how I like mine. It's more of a stew, really, than anything else. Oh my god, this is going to be so good. I can already tell this is going to be delicious because of the way that the broth is looking. I think you guys can see that really nice red color. So that's the paprika, that's the tomatoes all coming together. And it's got this sort of shine to it. That means that I put enough fat in there. I don't have a slick on the top partially because of the potatoes, sort of thickening that slick into the broth, but also because of the beans. And what that means is that when you taste it, you're not going to taste oil, you're going to taste fat. And that's going to make you, again, feel sort of like that meaty vibe. So I am going to just take a quick little try of this just to make sure my seasoning is good. And then I'm going to make sure it heats all the way through. I don't want to... anytime you add anything to stew or soup or food in general, you want to make sure you heat it through. The dangers of sort of bacterial growth happen in that safety zone, or the danger zone between room temperature and 165. And so The faster you can get through there, the better, which is what we're doing right now. I'm actually going to crank this. But you never want to like stop. If you add something, you don't want to stop in that middle range, because if there was any bacteria in it, which I highly doubt, these are canned beans, stopping in that middle range is going to let them immediately start to grow and multiply and go crazy. So anytime you add something to food, you want to bring it to temperature before you even consider serving it, especially in a public setting like this. At home, take the risks you want to take, but canned beans aren't going to be problematic. If I had cooked these beans the night before and they sat in my fridge, for instance, that's when I really want to make sure I heat it all the way through, because those are beans that have been in a place where they could have been, infected. Wow, this is going to be so good. Okay, cool. Let's get a spoon and just try my broth and see where we're at here. Might just try a whole spoonful. I got a feeling I'm going to want just a little bit more smoked paprika, but not too much, just from what I remember from earlier. Nope, I don't think that needs anything. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's see. What could I possibly do to make that better? I don't know. I don't think I could. Oh yeah. All right. So we're just gonna give this a little bit of second. I'm just gonna wait till I see some bubbles start to come through, and then we'll be in serving mode. I gotta find a ladle. We used to have this really nice cup measure. I don't know if you guys remember, and it disappeared. And then I didn't find it, and then forgot to go find a replacement. 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. 5, 10, 20. Yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm going to put the salt and pepper and paprika out. If you guys want to supercharge your dishes, particularly on the salt side, go for it. It's not going to offend me whatsoever. I think this is pretty good. It can definitely be saltier and wouldn't hurt the dish, but I don't think it needs more salt. But if you like more salt, please, please, please add it. It's going to make it that much more delicious and tasty for you guys. I almost could just serve it with a spatula. It's that thick. But I want you guys to get plenty of that broth, so. Oh yeah. Oh man. So yeah, when I made this for the West Tisbury Library, I did twice this much, and it was a little bit more brothy than this, but even then it was pretty chunky. And when I'm thinking soup in the winter, I guess I just consistently, I think stew, really. We started with a really nice, it's starting to bubble. We started with a really thin soup earlier in this session with the squash soup I did, but I did put seasoned turkey on top of it, so that kind of made it more hearty. We're just sort of slowly getting more and more hearty with our stews. This one being mostly veggies, sort of inherently is a little less hearty, but next month we're probably going to have some heavy cream involved, so we're going to be getting real thick. And that's just another hint for those of you guys. If you haven't figured it out by now, you probably haven't lived here very long. All right, awesome. I'm just going to make sure that when I stop here, we get bubbles pretty quick, and I think it's ready to go.
What's the date of the next one, 27th?
27th, yeah, I'm actually going away in February, so we will have it again at the end of the month. And then we'll be after next one, we'll be into our next series, which I am pretty sure is going to be desserts. I haven't done desserts before, and there's one particular dessert I just learned how to make that I'm very excited to show you guys how to make. And so I'm thinking desserts, but I'm not sure what else to do besides that dessert, because dessert can get a little awkward. A lot of times it involves baking, and because of time, it's if I bake something, there's this awkward moment where I'm just doing stand-up comedy, basically, which is fine with me, I need some practice, I guess. But the flow is, for me, at least for this class, I feel is kind of really important. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do. It might just be Chris's favorites, because this dessert is one of my favorite desserts. And then there's a potato salad that I want to potentially show you guys that is one of my favorite potato salads. So we'll see what happens. But if you guys aren't signed up for the newsletter, definitely sign up for the newsletter. It's going to all be in there. So this has got to be done at this point. The bottom's nice and hot, so I think it's just so full that it's just that there's just no way bubbles are getting to the top. We're going to call it that. There's no way that you guys are going to have any problems with that. Now I just need to find a way to serve it to you. Let's see. I didn't come up with a solution before. Yeah, this will be fine. Okay, sweet. So guys, for those of you in the back, I'd love for you guys to come up first. You guys have the worst view, so you get the food first. All right, cool. Nice. I think there's enough that's actually going to be an okay serving. If you don't want that much, you can just tell me. But I do think that
not that much.
All right, cool. We'll do a little bit smaller for you. This is the most ridiculous serving spoon I've ever had to use.
I knew there was a cup in there somewhere.
Amazing.
Grace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you for saying it. Again, just let me know if you don't want that much. I can definitely do smaller servings, but I don't usually know anything about limitations, so I'm like full cup every time. Of course. Let me know what you guys think too. I love feedback. Big fan, especially for my food. I always am a little bit self-conscious whenever I feed other people, just because I like people to enjoy themselves. But yeah, of course you can.
I ate before I came.
Yeah, ain't nothing wrong with that. It's still too much. I don't know anything about restraint. I'm very bad at it.
Help serving her?
No, I'm almost done already.
Hey, baby.
Hi.
You're so cute. You really are.
Thank you. This is my aunt and mom, guys, so it's okay that she said that.
Family. Come on. Stop trying to take care of me. Big sister.
Now you don't have any. Yum.
Yeah, go for it.
Doesn't that look so good? Yes. Oops, that's a fork. Those are spoons. Most of them are spoons.
Yeah, I think there was a couple forks in there for sure.
Got it. Oh, thank you. How are you, Doug? I am good. How are you? Good. My day's highlight.
It's quiet so far, so nobody's like, nobody hates it. That's good.
Is this one ready to go?
That's you, Peter, yeah.
All right, thank you.
How are you? I haven't seen you in so long. It's nice to see you and Mrs.
This
Mott.
is somebody else.
You got it. You take as much as you want.
Yeah, you did.
Did I? What a compliment.
Aw. Yeah, you and Cass.
We definitely aren't quiet. I'll do less for you? Okay, yeah, for sure.
Jackie, did you get yours?
No, I gave it to you.
Oh, thank you.
We're
Of
checking
course.
you out.
Oh yeah, did you get a fork too? There's like one fork hiding in there somehow.
It's in my it's in my bean.
All right, lovely. Did everybody get one?
Almost.
I think I need one more. You two both need one?
I got one more, yep.
That's just our HVAC system. Don't worry. It likes to let us know that it's working.
You're welcome. Anyone need
All
napkins?
right, perfect.
So good.
It is good.
Perfect on a cold pick.
Yeah, exactly.
No?
I gotta get in there myself. Why is it? I mean, honestly, you probably could eat this with a fork.
Yeah, just enough. Yeah, right.
Let's see how we did. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not too shabby. I think in the end, I probably could have put more smoked paprika in. It wouldn't have hurt.
You smell them.
I can't believe you didn't use linguiça for as much as you love linguiça.
I know. Well, it was, again, like I said, it was kind of an accessibility choice. I wanted to show you guys what it's like without linguiça. Because because for some people it's like never. Why would you not put linguiça in kale soup? But I wanted to show that it's possible to still have something that's very, very flavorful and incredibly close to the original. Again, I do think more smoked paprika would not have been a bad thing. But otherwise, I feel pretty happy about this, guys. And with that, I think we're gonna turn off the recording and say goodbye until next month. Again, it's the 27th of February when we'll be doing our next one. If you haven't guessed it, it's gonna be really good. It's gonna be delicious. It's something I've made before on when we were cooking at my house. So you've seen this recipe before, but I've never done it in person. You guys have never gotten a chance to try it, and I really do think it's the best on Martha's Vineyard. And you can even go try it preemptively if you head to Beach Road, which is where that's not an endorsement. It's just where they are cooking it. That's my recipe that I left there, and I think it's the best damn X on Martha's Vineyard. So I'll see you guys next month, hopefully, for that. In the meantime, if you want to check out any of the old recipes, they are on the Egertown Library YouTube. Just search in Egertown Library YouTube in your search bar. And if you want to go way, way back, you can go to Trash Panda EPL for Egertown Public Library.wordpress.com. And that's all the food blog that I did during COVID when I was cooking at home. So a lot of great recipes there. Really nice cocktails as well. There's a particular one with ginger beer and sesame oil that is so dear to my heart. So guys, thanks for coming. Thank you for being here. And I hope to see all you guys next month.
Thank you.